What's up, Money Minds? Welcome back to Market Briefs Video Edition. Today is October 15th, and here's some business and financial news you can finally use. Private investments into space companies surpassed $10 billion this year, but that doesn't come without some serious criticism from our friends across the pond. Prince William says that billionaires need to put their money and resources towards saving the earth instead of just trying to get away from it. Serious burn, Prince William. Next up in our October 14th market recap, major indexes rallied in a major way on Thursday. Investors were encouraged by better than expected earnings reports from big banks. We've got the full story later on in this newsletter. 8 members of the S&P 500 reported earnings this morning, and every single one of them beat earnings per share expectations. The benchmark US Treasury yield sank, pushing stocks even higher. A new challenger, though, is approaching. GitLab made its public debut on the NASDAQ yesterday. It popped off for over 22% of gains in its first day. Next up in our financial tip of the day, let's hear some words of wisdom from Kevin O'Leary. Kevin O'Leary once said, "Teach your children about money early and do to them the greatest favor ever in their lives." And something can definitely be said about money management. But if you want to learn how to manage your money the right way, our team put together an awesome article over on theminoritymindset.com, and I'll leave a link to it in the description below. In addition, Jaspreet had a full-length interview with Mr. Wonderful himself, aka Kevin O'Leary, and if you want to watch that full video on our main channel, I'll leave a link in the description below to that video as well. Next up, let's talk about earnings once again. Another bundle of earnings reports cheered up headlines and lifted investor spirits yesterday. Shares of Bank of America jumped after the bank reported better than expected numbers across the board. A reserve release of $1.1 billion helped push the bank higher. The bank profits rose by around 58%, and its revenue hit $22.87 billion. Next up is Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo followed its fellow bank's footsteps with a similar earnings beat. Similarly, its jump in profit was sparked by a release of credit loss reserves of around $1.65 billion. Earnings per share were around $1.22 versus the 99 cents that were expected, and revenue was around $18.83 billion versus the $18.35 billion that was expected. However, Wells Fargo did pick up a $250 million fine for unsafe practices tied to its loan modification program. Yikes. Lastly, Walgreens crushed expectations on its fiscal fourth quarter earnings and revenue. It got a major lift from vaccine shots, increased testing, and demand for over-the-counter meds. Walgreens administered double the amount of COVID-19 vaccines, around 13.5 million, than it expected earlier in the quarter. In other news, Walgreens became the majority owner of VillageMD with another $5.2 billion investment this week. In our second main story of the day, time's up. Foreclosures spiked as pandemic-related mortgage relief programs began to expire. Government and private sectors allowed struggling borrowers to miss up to 18 months of payments during the pandemic. The missed payments would either get tacked on to the end of the loan period or would have to get repaid once the house was sold. Lenders started to close on around 25,209 properties during the third quarter, a 32% increase from the prior quarter. It also marks a 67% increase from the quarter in 2022. There are typically around 40,000 new foreclosures every single month, but that fell to a low of around 3,000 to 4,000 in 2020 after the relief programs were put into place. Although more foreclosures are taking place than ever before, numbers are still low compared to pre-pandemic levels. California is the lead for foreclosures with a pretty low total of around 3,434. Texas, Florida, New York, and Illinois are close behind with less than 3,000 foreclosures. That is it for our main two stories of the day today. So let's take a quick break to talk about today's sponsor, M1 Finance. When you invest with M1 Finance, it is as easy as one, just pick your pie. That'll show M1 Finance exactly how you want your money to be invested. Number 2, set up automatic deposits so a percentage of your paycheck is automatically invested. And 3, just sit back and let the market do its thing. Of course, without worrying about commissions. Can't afford to invest in your favorite company though? No problem. M1 Finance lets you invest in fractional shares so you can buy half of a share. If you want to learn exactly how M1 Finance works, I'll leave a link in the description below on how you can find them. Big shout out to M1 Finance for sponsoring this video, and now back to the news. Next up, it's closing time for China. Microsoft is shutting down the last major US social network in China. LinkedIn will no longer be a thing in China as the country faces stricter censorship across major platforms. Twitter and Facebook have been banned in China for well over a decade now, so it was only a matter of time before LinkedIn got the axe. But Microsoft is looking to launch a China-specific version of LinkedIn later this year, used strictly for job searching. It won't have built-in social media aspects that the other versions have. So how exactly does that hurt Microsoft? Well, China is LinkedIn's third largest market, so getting a version up and running that complies with Chinese regulations is Microsoft's top priority. LinkedIn nets around $10 billion in annual revenue from Microsoft, which it acquired in 2016 for around $26.2 billion. Next up in our mind blown section, let's talk about the debt wars. The US has around $14.88 trillion in outstanding consumer debt, a $3 trillion increase from 2010. In typical American fashion though, who can we actually blame this on? Here's a breakdown of which generation is racking up the most debt. Gen Z has on average around $16,043 in debt. The 18 to 23-year-old group is currently holding the lowest amount of debt per person. An eighth of that debt is credit card debt, which each member of Gen Z holding an average outstanding credit balance of around $2,000. Next up is millennials, who hold an average debt of around $87,000. The next line in generation holds a little bit more, with an average student loan balance of around $39,000 and a mortgage balance of around $237,349. Next up is Gen X with an average debt balance of around $140,000. The winners, if that's what you want to call it, for the most indebted generation goes to the 41 to 56 age group. The massive debt comes largely from sending their kids to college while also holding an average student loan balance of around $45,000. And lastly, we have the baby boomer generation, which has an outstanding debt of around $97,000 per person, with a personal loan balance of around $19,700, outstanding credit card debt of around $6,043, and $178,000 on their mortgages. Boomers are still pretty deep in the hole, but still doing much better than their kids' generation. Next up in our Pick Your Brain section, let's talk about entertainment. The new South Korean show Squid Games is Netflix's biggest series ever at launch, with over 111 million accounts tuning in less than a month since its debut. The series is now #1 in 94 countries and the first Korean series to reach #1 in America. Next up in our Money Mind section, anybody want some extra guac? Jaspreet and I joined forces and delivered our first ever Guac Talk series episode. I'm thinking you can call us the Avocado Bros. If you want to check out our Guac Talk episode where we talk all about how to get rich in 1 year, I'll leave a link to that episode in the description below. In our Mind Break section, the McRib is coming back. Well, not yet, but the McRib is coming back sometime next month. But a brand new McDonald's sandwich is making its debut in the meantime. They're calling it the McPlant. Made from a blend of peas, rice, and potatoes, the McPlant will be the chain's first swing at a plant-based option. The McPlant, though, will not be vegan, as it includes mayo and cheese and will be cooked on these same grills as the beef burgers. In order to do this, McDonald's partnered up with Beyond Meat to test the new plant-based burger in 8 U.S. locations throughout California, Louisiana, Texas, and Iowa. The test period is to make sure demand is high enough to support the veggie patties. Money Minds, we are nearing the end of today's business and financial newsletter, but here's just a few more things to keep in mind. Over 10,000 John Deere employees went on strike yesterday. The workers said if a standard of living, benefits, and work environment were not improved by October 13th, they're gone. Another thing to keep in mind is TSMC will create a new chip producing factory in Japan. The new plant will produce chips specifically found in cars or iPhones since they're suffering the most in this chip shortage. The thing to keep in mind is Matt Amadio, 38-time Jeopardy winner, says he plans to long-term invest and hold his $1.5 million reward, and us money nerds could not be more proud of him. And finally, the world-famous restaurant 11 Madison Park just scratched a meat entirely from its menu. Regardless, one dinner there still costs around $335 per person. But that is it for today's business and financial news. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button below. Keep hustling, money minds, and I'll see you all in the next one.